So here's another quick case study technique video. Slightly confusing title, recommendations on recommendation. So what do we mean? Basically, how do you do good recommendations in case study? So first tip, as with many other areas of case study, make sure you look at the past paper mark schemes in a lot of detail. There's no discretion for the marker in case study. They're only going to reward the sorts of things you see in the past papers. So have a look at those just at the recommendations box in each requirement. I think it's the final box in each requirement mark scheme, so you should be able to find it quite quickly. Another thing we'd always recommend, no pun intended, is jot the recommendations down or type them up as you go along, because what we find on our course is a lot of people in the main discussion had an idea that perhaps could have been extended into a recommendation, but they forgot to include it by the time they get to the end of the report section, which is where you put the recommendations in. So if you jot them down or type them up immediately, as soon as it comes into your head as you're going through, then that can't happen, and you'll have to think a lot less hard when you get to the end of the report or the requirement section. And the recommendations are kind of done for you already from your existing ideas. When you're looking at requirement one, try and think about what's been going badly in the year. There'll always be some elements of the financial performance that are weak or even worse. So focus on those. That's what the requirement one recommendations tend to be about. And again, if you go through the jot down or type up process that we just talked about, then as you're going through, anytime you see something going wrong, you'll be creating some recommendations, hopefully, at that time. Requirement two and requirement three, if you do what we said first, look at the past papers, you'll see they are very similar recommendations. They're very similar requirements in general. So don't be afraid to use the same recommendation, obviously tweaked slightly in your answer in both requirements. You might want to negotiate terms and conditions and give some examples. Do that in requirement two and then tweak it, obviously slightly word it differently for requirement three. That's fine. You might find you need to do due diligence on someone in requirement two and due diligence on someone else in requirement three. So have a go with that. It can definitely work. Finally, don't write too much. So we know that there's some tuition providers say that you really have to justify the recommendations and write in a lot of detail, maybe a bit like in SBM. That's not the case. The examiners have said the recommendations really should just follow on from what you've already discussed. You're not required to justify them in huge detail, and bullet points of 6 to 8 words can be absolutely fine. Try not to do cheeky recommendations like boost profits, because that's kind of pointless. It's too obvious and it doesn't tell them how to do it. But you might want to say increase margin by reducing labor costs or something like that. So not a long essay, is it? But it's just a bit better than something generic like boost profits. Okay, that's it. Let us know if you have any questions.